Lindenhurst is a village of 27,000 on the south shore of Long Island, New York. These are the people who grew up there and their stories. Everyone I know is from Lindenhurst.
I got my mini ring light on my webcam because I'm a TikTok star. I'm not actually.
It's that influencer life.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So this is a little different, I guess, format for the podcast since you guys work in Lindenhurst but aren't necessarily from Lindenhurst.
That's right.
Yeah, I
feel
feel
like
like
I have family
Lindenhurst
history. My both sides of my family going back to the 1950s. Lindenhurst. So
Okay.
do have that. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get into that. We'll start with you, Rich. Just talk to us about your family roots in Lindenhurst and a little bit about you growing up and what brought you to your current profession as a teacher.
Sure. All right. So let me see if I can get this right. My mother's side of the family moved to Lindenhurst in 1948, I believe, late 40s, after World War II. Both my grandfathers were in World War II. So when they came back, they got married to my grandmothers. 1948 for my mother's side, early 50s for my father's side. My father's side, my grandfather and technically my grandmother too started a business in the 60s on the Bowery, right? Because they did restaurant equipment. So even though the Bowery is very, different, obviously now hipster, whatever. If you go around the Bowery, you'll see restaurant equipment businesses. That's the same. That's the only factory thing that remains there. So they started there, then they moved to Copiague in the early 70s, and then finally Lindenhurst in I think 77. And they were in Lindenhurst on South Hoffman, between Clinton and Delaware. So the building's still there. It's actually on both sides of Clinton. Started on the east side of Clinton, and then they took over both sides in the early 2000s. And so my father and his brothers turned it into a restaurant equipment with Italian like pizzerias, but then ultimately pizza ovens was the big thing from the 90s on. So they started with Sbarro's, and once you started to see all the brick ovens around Long Island and wherever, they turned into a huge company. They were number 2 in the U.S. When they sold it 2000, I want to say 16, a couple years ago, 2017. Yeah. So they got bought out by the biggest company, and they were all able to retire. So, but it was him and his brothers, and it was called Marcel because my grandmother was Mary, my grandfather was Sal. So they had that in Lindenhurst from 77 to right around 2017. So a long time. Yeah. So I grew up in Islip and spent a lot of time in Lindenhurst because of my grandparents and also because I worked with my father when I was in high school. And then a mutual friend, a friend I had since 5th grade, this kid, Scott Field. His father taught at Lindenhurst. My mother also was an English teacher, taught at Lindenhurst for a brief period of time. And I kept in touch with him when I was in college. I went to college for English, but then when I got out looking for a job, I was thinking about teaching. And he told me, if you come to Lindenhurst, there's going to be in 2003, 40 teachers retiring, so it's the perfect situation. And so I started student teaching in 2002. And then, spring of 2003. And then got hired fall 2003. And like you said, it was actually 2004, I guess. 40 teachers retired. Most of the English department retired. And so just got in right at the right time. Yeah. And Mike was already there.
Yeah.
And Mike was already run the happy hours from my first day there. Yeah.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah, he was the biggest influence on the younger teachers because, happy hour.
Yeah. And being a union rep might have helped to lead you.
That's true. That's true. He was union rep for most, with the first 10 years.
10 years of your career. Yeah.
That's true.
Okay. So Mike, just give us a little background on
so,
you.
I guess since we're talking about family and Lindenhurst, my father, who was born in Maspeth, Queens, the ash heaps of Maspeth, right? He moved out when he was 5 to the Babylon area. Growing up in North Babylon, West Babylon area. And he would often, obviously go over to Lindenhurst because there wasn't much going on. There was Babylon, Lindenhurst, everything was villages. Back then it was still kind of pretty sparse. And I know that when he first got his first job was a guy in Lindenhurst. His name was Frank. He lived on, I want to say South 8th or 9th. He was, if you've ever been by the house back in the day, He had this big, beautiful house with statues and everything on the lawn and everything. He was an artist, and so he was a sign painter with him. So, he got his first job
Was
in
that the big
Lindenhurst.
kind of like Gothic looking house?
It
It's the
was,
house
and they
across
took
the
it
street
down
from the cemetery.
from the cemetery across the street.
Oh.
So
Okay.
what I've been told quickly is that there used to be a church there many, many years ago, and that's a cemetery across the street where the priests were buried, and the priests lived in that house that your father's friend lived in,
Oh, wow.
which is why it was set up the way it was
Hmm.
before your friend got into it.
Wow. Yeah,
And
because
when OOPH came to town, they burned that church down so they could open another church on Wellwood Avenue, supposedly.
Whoa.
that sounds pretty
Church wars.
Italian legend.
Yeah, wow, that's yeah, I know that he had an indoor swimming pool and everything in his house, and yeah, but he anyway. So then, me growing up, I would often wind up in Lindenhurst. My father being district commissioner for the Boy Scouts. The district meetings would be in Lindenhurst Middle School, so I used to go there as a kid. I remember going to the theater that we used to have, for 99 cents or whatever. You'd go see whatever movie that was a hit 4 months beforehand. And, so I had a lot of connections with Lindenhurst, growing up in North Babylon, not too far away, so it was kind of neat when I got a job there in 1996. I started in the Lindenhurst Middle School. And, I've been there ever since, moved up. The December of 99, I moved up to the high school, and still there.
This was something I wanted to bring up because I remember specifically, I never had you as a teacher, but I got to know you. But very close friends of mine, there was the teacher that left in the middle of the year, and you took her place, and the entire science department got shuffled that year. And I had a class with another teacher, Mr. 40, and had to switch to another teacher in the middle of the year because I guess supposedly my friend's class drove that woman crazy.
Well, okay. Now, okay. I can only tell a certain perspective. I'm not going to use her name because who knows, but she was originally an engineer. And so what happens, in my weird perspective, is I think a lot of people say, oh, well, I can always teach. And they don't realize it's a totally different skill set.
Sure.
And so her coming from an engineering background to suddenly be thrust into a bunch of high schoolers. And you know how high schoolers can be. They can sense weakness, and so if they have any, and so some of the things they did was they took her lab equipment, they put it out on the roof, or one of them taped the bell on a cassette tape because that's what we had back then. And then in the middle of the period played it. And she's like, okay, go. And so things like that. So yeah, she definitely was not ready for the experience of teaching with high school kids. And I remember when I came up, because I was working in the middle school, teaching both math and science. And I was physics certified. So they're like, hey, but Mr. Sanfilippo didn't want me to go right away when she first, I think she escaped in early November or late October.
Escaped.
Yeah.
I do think she left in the middle of a class.
No, she did. She went into the back office. And the reason why I say escaped is because she went into the back office, and then a whole bunch of administrators came in and they went into the back office. And all the class for period 1 was just sitting there what's going on? What's going on? And then all of a sudden, one administrator comes out from the back office, closes the door, and walks out, and they're still alone. And then they're completely alone, and it's now second period, and they don't hear anything. And one kid finally went and opened up the door, and everyone was gone because there's another door that led into the hallway. But they were just so they called her name escape route for a while for that year because that's why I use the term escape. But so she was gone. And when I finally came up, every teacher's like, oh my God, those kids are so bad. They're so bad. They're so bad. And I get up there and they're the sweetest kids, It's they're just fine.
Yeah, they all loved you.
I mean, they were great. They were just these wonderful kids. I had no problem with them. We just we zoomed right back into the year, and I had to then teach a year's worth of physics in a half a year, and we did the best we could, and we got through it. Yeah, that was an exciting time. It was also kind of neat because a lot of those kids in that age group knew me from the middle school. And
Right.
so like they may have been in the, so some kids, especially like the freshmen that year, had known me for their 3 years of middle school and then knew me again for their 4 years of high school. So that was like, I
Right.
had a really strong bond with a lot of kids of those years, having known some of them for like 4 years to 7 years.
Right. Finder was a teacher like that for me that I had in the middle school that was then
Yes.
moved up to the high school eventually.
Yeah, he was hired the same year as I was. Yeah.
Is he
Yeah.
still there?
He's
Hey,
a
he's still there.
coordinator.
He's a coordinator.
Okay.
Been a coordinator since I started there. So long
Yeah,
time.
long time.
Wow. So, where did both of you guys study? Where did you go to college?
Rich,
I
you
was
want to go first?
University of Delaware.
Okay.
Go Blue
Yeah.
Hens, right?
Yeah, Blue Hens. We got voted in Sports Illustrated the weakest mascot,
Yes.
or at least intimidating mascot, or whatever. Yeah,
Weren't you like the biggest party school though at some point?
that was like a couple years before I went there, early '90s,
Yeah.
and then so that when I went there, they were really trying to like hammer down on stuff. So we got the negative end of it as far as partying went. It was kind of like, and that was never my thing, but it was kind of like the old school frat house, like Revenge of the Nerds, like seeing people fly out of windows and that kind of thing. So that still was there, but I heard stories. We used to have a delivery service for food that, like any other college where you get a meal plan, so you get a certain amount of meals at the cafeteria, and then a certain amount of money that you could spend on things. And apparently, up until the year before I started there, like '96, you could order beer with that. So kids would just go and spend all their parents' money on beer getting delivered to the dorm room. So yeah, I guess it was kind of a party school up until that point, but they definitely cracked down while I was there. They also had a thing called Mug Night, which was like you buy a $10 mug at the beginning of the semester, and then it was 15-cent fill-ups for beer. And when I
Like the Ready
started,
Cup at Starbucks.
it was glass, which is not a good idea when you get all these
Oh.
like college students wasted at a bar, and there was like accident after accident after accident, and then finally it was plastic by like my senior year. But
I think that's the reason why I didn't have a prom weekend. They were kind of trying to crack down on. This was '99.
Okay.
We didn't have a prom week. I think we had like a rehearsal for graduation the next day, so we kind of got screwed out of that. Not that I cared, but
yeah.
I've
only gone to, I think, I know Mike, you've probably gone to a lot more than I have. I think I went to one Lindenhurst prom, the one that was over out east by me. That was the reason I went. They used to be able to invite teachers to go. Now it seems like it's not as loose anymore. But now you can go as a chaperone, but I don't know if you go just getting invited.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've been to every prom from 2001 up until 2022.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, last prom was the only prom I wasn't invited to. I was invited to 2000s, but I had pneumonia.
Okay.
That was the one at the World Trade Center.
Is there any way they would ever do it in the gym like they do on TV, or is that just something that would never happen?
I don't think the kids would stand for it.
Gotcha.
I mean, they do it up in Port Jeff in the gym, and
I saw they did it that way. Not when I was there, but when my brother was there. Yeah,
I think it's kind of
safer
cool
that way, but
it's kind of a cool thing too. Like if you do the whole you make a whole thing out of it. Like how we do it with
or whatever. Yeah.
How kind of like how we do with these floats. We build these giant floats, costing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and then bring them down the road once and throw them out. I think I'd rather have them take that same kind of effort and have every class see if they can make the best part of prom design or something. I don't know.
Save Halloween it or whatever they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Something fun. I don't know. I mean, I think it would be cute, but I don't think the kids would want it.
Well, they spend so much money on the places, on the venues that they go to. So
much
they could
money.
Put the money into something else.
So much money. They could save so much money. And think about it, well, you know what? I got to say, a lot of things have changed over the years. I've noticed kids have moved away from needing a limo. A lot less kids are bringing those limos.
I was surprised by that. Yeah.
A lot of them are like, why am I paying all this money for a limo?
Yeah,
let's just
Uber.
get, let's just get an Uber or mom, and it's really fine. Like the kids are fine with it and nobody really talks about it. Like, oh, your mom brought you, everything is so much cooler that way now, I think. So
yes.
So in relation to the prom, this question is do they still have a Halloween pageant?
No.
Oh,
Yeah, they
Okay.
got rid of that a
Wow.
long time ago.
What was that? I don't even know what that was.
So every year on Halloween, they would have seniors gather in the gym. I guess maybe it was in the auditorium sometimes, and basically like a costume contest, and the winner would get like a free prom bid, and second place might get like free photos or free, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But prizes in that way, and a couple times it went a little awry with people wearing tasteless costumes, but most of the time it was kind of fun.
Yeah, most of the time it was fun, and it did sometimes go right.
I think we've gone full circle with that too, because I remember when I first started teaching around Halloween or on Halloween, they would ban the costumes because they were afraid of kids wearing things that they shouldn't have. Now they don't even say anything, and the kids dress up, and there's never an issue.
Well, I think that kids would have dressed more inappropriately back in the day. No offense.
I think that's true. Yes.
No offense to your generation, John.
No, we were assholes.
I dressed very slutty. Yeah.
But it was like, I mean, yeah, it was like.
Uh-huh. It was
definitely,
like
I think that there was
time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In general, I notice that the kids now, the newest generation, like Generation Z or whatever, they don't bully each other as much. They're much more open minded about things. So we don't have to really deal with that the way like my first 10 years we had to deal with maybe like homophobic comments or racist comments or any of that kind of stuff. It just doesn't seem to really exist. And when kids do say things that are out of line, it's almost like they don't realize it, and then they don't fight back the way they used to when it comes to that.
And a lot of times even the other kids will be like, "Yo, dude, that's messed up."
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool that we've gone to that way about it. Like, I know that I have in my cafeteria a student who has a lot of verbal and physical outbursts of sorts. Not bad ones, but just like. Again, I don't want to define too much of what's happening to make a person feel like we're talking about them. But like every kid is just like, nope, that's just what they do. That's just them.
Mm-hmm.
We've known them our whole lives. They've always been like that. It's just the way it is. And it's definitely a lot better than when I was a kid. When I was a kid, anybody who was not like, I was the generation they wrote Breakfast Club around. Like everybody had to fit into a mold or you were an outcast. You were Ali Sheedy.
It wasn't that
mold
much
of sorts.
I think that was a Generation X thing in general, because it wasn't that much different when I was in high school. I remember we had a full like black on white race fight in our cafeteria. I was a freshman, so we were all like kind of like, cowardly in the corner, but everybody else, the whole cafeteria was like throwing things, and I couldn't imagine that happening anymore. It just wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
That was what my old band was named after: Heads versus Breakers.
Oh, right.
Metalheads versus Breakdancers.
Yeah.
They used to have big,
Wow, that's kind of what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was with this fight I'm talking about. I remember it was a bunch of kids playing something on a boom box, and then a bunch of like stoner kids getting upset, and so yeah.
Stupid.
Yeah,
right. It's stupid. It's exactly
stupid.
Right.
Yeah, in general, I think the kids are nicer to one another, which is good to see. Yeah,
absolutely. It's beautiful.
We have a lot of kids that have I have a lot of kids I teach inclusion that have like Asperger's or on the spectrum in some way. And we read a book that's about that, where the narrator has Asperger's, so that kind of helps to talk about it. But normally, when I was first started teaching, kids like that who would say, socially inappropriate things, things that other kids would laugh at, or they, something physical they do that's kind of awkward or out of place. Nowadays, when that happens, the kids maybe look at them strange, but nobody says anything or picks on them or anything like that, which is great.
Right.
Makes our job a lot easier.
Do they make it a point to give you? I'm sorry. Do they make it a point to give you guys like specific, like diversity and inclusion training and stuff like that?
I mean,
have you seen that change over time?
You see, I think that they tried to do it a few years ago, and then like it didn't go over as well as it should have. But it kind of like has seeped in. I think people get like upset when things get forced on them. But I think it's definitely
but they're like, we're
been a metamorphosis among, I think myself included, of all of us, as far as like becoming more aware of like, what we're saying and what we're doing and
how to handle those situations, even when it comes to, I don't know, like I think with most things I've realized teaching are really hard to have somebody come in and talk to the faculty and say, you should do this, you should do that. It's often people that aren't in the classroom. Mike said, I think those of us that have been in the classroom for a while, you just naturally, hopefully, like kind of pivot from being one way to being a little better about that as you have experience with how the kids react to it, rather than listening to someone who has all these theories about how you should teach, that they haven't really seen it in practice.
Yeah,
So.
And I also think,
experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I also think in general with everybody, when you meet more diverse people, you become more open to diverse people.
Oh, absolutely.
And so as they're your kids, like I'm sure Rich feels the same way. These are my kids. These are mine.
Mhm.
Like, I love them. Like, they are my kids. And, definitely I get a little like Papa Bear sometimes when somebody starts saying something about like certain groups. There's still adults out there, not in our, well, I don't know, but I'm going to say definitely outside of the school. I've run into people. I'm like, yo, what are you talking about? And they're usually people my age who have these rose-colored glasses of the past. And I'm like, dude, I was in high school with you. That's not exactly how the world was at all.
Yeah.
And it's like, but like, because like, we will deal with, well, not deal. I hate to say that word. That's a dumb word, but we will experience all kinds of cultures now. We have a much wider diversity of cultures. When I first started Lindenhurst, I remember being a little uneasy because I grew up in North Babylon, and all of a sudden I come to Lindenhurst that was 91% white at that time. And I was like, this feels weird to me because I grew up with a much more diverse background.
Yeah.
So
it still skews very white.
It is, but it's getting,
it's different. Yeah.
It's getting
we have
different.
so many, you'd be surprised how many, not just the Polish kids, but we have so many kids from like Ukraine and from, other.
We have a lot of people who are, first generation Pakistani, first generation Indian, first generation Bangladeshian. We have first generation Nigerians. We have first generation, of course, Dominican and Haitian, and like we have a lot of nice, first generation from a lot of the world now.
I think Lindenhurst being fairly affordable.
I wouldn't call it really super diverse, but there's at least the diversity opportunity there.
Yeah. Much more than it was, yeah. No, I think Lindenhurst being fairly affordable compared to other towns on Long Island. Especially rent-wise. Exactly. Yeah. But rent-wise, it's traditionally fairly affordable. I think that attracts a lot of the first generation people coming here, looking for something affordable to start out with. So, yeah, definitely.
I'm sorry, we didn't get to Mike. Were you
okay?
studying?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I went to New York Institute. I was ready to pivot, but then we went into other areas. So I'm like, oh,
that's good. Yeah,
but my pivot was going to be. I've had the exact opposite experience because I went to a commuter college, New York Institute of Technology in Old Westbury. There was no dorms there. There were, if you wanted to, you could dorm next door because they rented a dorm from CW Post, but it was like pretty much there was not at all like it was all like everybody like vacated, which was like kind of an interesting thing, but it was good for me as far as like where I was in my life. Because believe it or not, I was a little bit more withdrawn in high school, and in college is really where I learned to break out. And just because I would get involved, I like to get involved in things. So I was on the student government. I was in the Role Player Gaming Association. I was in the physics club. I was in the theater. I was doing shows and stuff like that. I was friends with the editor of the newspaper. I would always help out with all the different functions that were happening there. So I got involved with a lot of things on campus. And so as a result, I got like a lot of confidence because I was the guy almost everybody knew because I was involved with almost everything you were going to do. So that was really good for me, even though it wasn't a party school. It was still like, a good experience for me. And, it's okay. I'm probably better off that I didn't go to a party school. It's probably better for me that I had a school where I had to like go over somebody's house and be safe, rather than
the big jump for me, not that it was a party school, was that when I graduated from Islip, the graduating class was 180, and then going to a school where there's 30 something thousand people. That was a huge thing, especially with classes. My first classes were like I want to say my freshman psychology class was 400 students. Wow. So a lot different to be like just a number rather than, so having the one-on-one teacher. Once I got into the English classes, the core classes, it was different. But
yeah,
the freshman year was a big shock. Yeah.
relating that back to Lindenhurst, how have you seen class sizes like grow or shrink over like your 10 years of teaching?
Good, Mike.
Oh yeah. So over the 28 years I've been in Lindenhurst, we started off with like, a medium size, I would say, of classes, around 500 or so. But then we got up in the mid 2000s up to like 650 kids per class. And that place was packed.
Wow.
And when you
Ultra packed, yeah.
when you have too many people in one space,
So that's like 40 kid classrooms.
well, not necessarily, because we can't do that. We have a contract that
Okay.
prevents them from doing that. But it did mean that every classroom was completely utilized 100%. And we would have sometimes 30-person classrooms, which they were really like, we were trying to grieve it. I'm like, we're not supposed to have this big of classrooms. And, they were like, oh, we're just helping you out because otherwise we'd be hiring people to fire them. I'm like, you're doing that anyway. But, and they did do that, unfortunately, for a lot of those people. But yeah, so we got up to 650 and now we're down to like 450 or something like that. Tremendous drop. And it also might be one of the reasons why there's a tremendous drop in like, a lot of the other problems you have. Because when you have too many people crowded in a small space, you're more likely to be angry at people. That, why is there all these people around me all the time? I mean, you remember the center hall, right? Like trying to get through that,
The center hall is still an issue.
Still an issue.
We're slowed down,
yeah.
That construction was only done my senior year.
Oh, okay.
Like
Right.
that whole new wing with all the office and stuff was only there my last year. I remember we came back as seniors and people's lockers were gone.
Yeah.
See, I don't know.
Because
How
remember,
the
we used to have
school
two
was.
libraries, right? One upstairs, one downstairs.
Right. I know that. I came
Yes.
after all that was changed.
Yeah.
When my parents went to school, my parents graduated 74. They had around 1,000 per class, so they had two shifts. They had
Two shifts, that's right.
they had a morning shift and an afternoon shift, and they had trailers in the parking lot for classrooms because they didn't have enough. So it went. That's the baby boom, obviously. So it's that was the max. But
I was going to ask, is like a lower birth rate kind of responsible for dwindling class size? Like less
I would
millennials are having kids now.
Yeah, I don't think it's not just Lindenhurst. I know.
Yeah.
It depends on the district. Like Islip's a lot bigger now than it was when I went to high school, but that's because people have moved into Islip from other places. But I think most schools are down from where they were. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we lost some people permanently from Sandy. I think there are some
Very good
people that
point.
permanently
Right, yeah.
moved out.
I had some students that school year that after Sandy never came back. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
So we have
That
a
was
little
like
bit
right
of
at the
that.
beginning of the school year too. That was
Yeah, like around
end of
Halloween.
End of
Yeah,
October.
around
Yeah.
Halloween. Yeah, around Halloween. Yeah, that was.
And Lindenhurst got a hit especially bad for that. Obviously.
Yeah, they got very
yeah.
bad. But we also had like one of the strongest like community supports. We had like that Camp Bulldog that was happening.
Oh
I
yeah.
remember driving around with like food for people,
Mhm.
delivering food to different places and stuff like that. Like, and I got to say, a lot of teachers stepped up and came into the community and like was like, oh yeah, we're going to help out. Like, we're supposed to be working, but we can't work because there's no school. And then,
Yeah.
but we might as well help the community because we're
Yeah,
part of
it's
this
good to see.
community. There's,
Mhm.
I remember just giving away so much stuff to people that it's just like, oh, just take it. You've
Mhm.
lost everything, but, and, a lot of teachers put a lot of hours in, a lot more than me even, just saying that, like, it was, as much as we got hit hard, it's like one of those things about Lindenhurst that I've always loved is when there has been a tragedy, I think our town has always come together. Like we've really stepped up a lot of times when there's been a tragedy.
Mhm.
Moving on a little bit, like starting out, what do you think like your guys' biggest challenges were? Just getting your feet wet as a teacher and, student teaching. And were there any doubts that this was your chosen profession?
I think with me, maybe a little bit the first couple of years, just because I had gone from in college wanting to go for maybe recording and then kind of pivoting to an English major my sophomore year, and then not being sure if I was going to go into writing or something along those lines, and then kind of figuring it out when I went to grad school, which was essentially the same year. I went summer 2002 is when I started going to grad school. Then I went, fall, and then I was student teaching by the spring. So it wasn't a lot of time to kind of make up my mind. But for the reason we said before, that most of what you learn is in the classroom. It's not from.
Sure.
I don't think I learned really anything from the classes I took beforehand that helped significantly. It was all in the classroom. So I, like I said, I knew the guy that I student taught with. He taught me a lot. His style was very similar to my style now. And I think first couple of years it was navigating, like, on top of the behavior of the students being maybe worse back then, or maybe I was just more vulnerable, or more, like Mike said, they smell your fear. Having to deal and not being too much older than the students. I was like 23 and my seniors were sometimes like 19, 20 years old. Dealing with that, I had a tough first year where there were two different pregnancies in the 12th graders I had. Like two girls ran away. There was like a drug overdose. There was a lot of things. So that happening, I never considered quitting, but I definitely would have, long talks with, my parents who had, gone through it. My mother was an English teacher, friends and coworkers and stuff like that about it. But I think by the third or fourth year, it kind of clicked to the point where when I came in, or even before we started in September, I was looking forward to it. And realizing that I was looking forward to it and I kind of missed it, that's where it kind of clicked that, all right, this is something that I should be doing. And then since then, I mean, now I'm 20, 21 years there. I still look forward to it. So, it's still worth it, which is a good sign.
Definitely. I think becoming a teacher was more of a realization moment for me that I had, fortunately, when I was young. So like in 12th grade, I was very lucky. My English teacher let me take over the classroom for a month and a half when I was in high school. And so I got a feeling of being a teacher back then. And that's actually what switched me to say, I want to be a teacher. Like, this is definitely what I want to do. But I got to say with Rich, the problem I have with the way they teach teachers is they teach teachers without letting them practice teaching. And so that's always been my thing. I'm like, you got to get these teachers into a classroom, even if it's once a week, to practice what you're teaching them. Because, otherwise, imagine if, you guys all know music. Imagine if you were like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to teach people music theory. Do not let them have any instruments. Do not let them sing. We're going to do that for 4 years. Just teach them theory. Okay. Now go and play, a full concert. Go. And that's what teaching is. It's like, wait a minute, what? And then they never teach you about the really stuff that's like the pain in the neck stuff, which is that in schools they do not the best job of telling you what you need to do. They just expect you to just know that, oh, this is the paperwork for this. There's nowhere where you can like find out a lot of things. It's all like, oh, how do I do this? How do I do this? It's all like, so much of it is like, wait, how do I, what do I do when a kid has like done this? It's like, oh, okay, you got to do this. Or I want to do a field trip. How do you do that? Well, you go to another teacher, because there's no like, there's nothing that really is any kind of like, thing to get you through. And all of a sudden it's like, what's going on here? So I guess that, like, for me, the difficult part was getting all of a sudden used to all the other parts of teaching that is beyond the classroom. Not saying I came in day one, awesome teacher. That's not at all true. I think I've learned so much over the years, and then like really have, and I'm still learning. Like, I think that, I joke around that I'll probably die in the classroom, but I hope that I'm still learning as I'm dying in front of my kids slowly.
Yeah. I think that's also a big benefit of the job too, because it reminds, I'm not a parent, and I have a lot of friends that are parents, and it seems like, every day is learning how to react to something new for parents. And I feel like it's the same thing in the classroom. Every year there's a new situation or a new problem that you see with a student, or a new issue, that you want to bring up or tackle. And for that reason, it could be challenging, but it keeps it fresh, and then it does get easier and easier as you go on, because now you have all these kind of tools to deal with situations. So even if something is slightly new, you've dealt with something similar before. Right. But it definitely keeps it exciting. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. And then I guess the key thing is, if you always approach things with like a kind of a love for the kid, like, hey, I want to help you.
Oh, absolutely.
You're going to do okay. You're going to do okay. You're going to like, you're going to find your way to get like the best way to give the information or whatever. But like some of my greatest moments that I consider my greatest moments as teacher was not teaching. It was like in the wake of tragedy,
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
there for the kids. You know, like,
Yeah.
I mean, not to be like, ringing the bell, everybody does, but I remember 9/11 being in the classroom. And then at the end of the year, I had some kids go, your classroom was the only time I felt safe. And that was like, I still get chills just thinking that I had that nice effect on somebody. Or when we had, unfortunately, a young man get killed. And then, he got killed over the weekend, and we're all in there Monday morning, and all the kids are just like so tense because they don't know how to react. And like the, the guidance counselors tried to come in, the social workers tried to come in, but the kids didn't know them really. So and I was their homeroom teacher, and it was with Stanley Rosengarten. Do you remember Mr. Rosengarten? He
I
taught
do.
physics. Yeah. So
Always
he
wore
kicked,
a three-piece suit.
yeah, he always wore a three-piece
Friends of
suit.
mine called him the Walking Dead.
He's still alive. He's still
He's
alive.
still alive.
And so he kicked them
He's
out. And then
1,000 years
like
old.
I started
Yeah,
talking to
he
the
was
kids, and then like I got them talking about how I've dealt with grief in my life. And then I'm like, it's in my tradition to always try to tell fun stories about the person. You know how you do at wakes, right? You're like, oh, remember that
Yeah.
time? And I go, sometimes it helps you get through that grieving process. And please remember, everybody's going to grieve at different rates. And don't feel guilty if during the day sometimes you feel good, because it's okay to sometimes feel good and still miss that person. It's okay.
Mhm.
And then like how much they appreciated that.
Yeah.
And so like I had a kid years later say, I want to thank you so much. He met me at Mary Carroll's. Surprise, surprise, I was there. And he's like, I want to thank you for that. So like moments like that, I think were when I was the best teacher. And it wasn't necessarily teaching, it was just being there for these kids. And I've always said, like, you may be the only light in their day because you don't know what kind of world that kid lives in.
Great point. Yeah, I mean,
I was going to say this was a point I wanted to bring up. Like, so I graduated in 2001. Columbine had happened when I was a junior, and that was the first of
My
an
senior year,
incident
yeah.
like that at all. Yeah, yeah. Or yeah, I guess I was a sophomore, and maybe the same year, or maybe the next year, there was a girl in my class who took her own life, and that was kind of a huge thing in the district as well then. But like, unfortunately, you've seen a lot more like national stories of school shootings and all of that. It's only increased as time has gone on. How do you think that, have you seen that affect like the student body over time? How do you see kids deal with that kind of stuff? Or,
I mean, part of it's that they're young, and so when you're that age, everything's happening for the first time, so they don't see the difference in how it is now.
right.
It's definitely unnerving, I think, for us, the faculty, that we do these kind of like lockdown drills now in a more severe way than we ever did in the past.
Right.
But I think with them, just like my parents who were like doing the nuclear war drills, under the desk, that sort of thing. I think when you're that age, it's all new to you. So it's all kind of like you're just seeing it. You're not really understanding whether it's better or worse than it was once, But it's definitely something, we like Mike said, you never know what's going on in a kid's background. So when you think about that sort of thing, like the sort of violence that could happen, definitely I think all of us, our antennas are up more than they used to be, because you hear about this. Fortunately, in Lindenhurst and in New York in general, we haven't really had those tragedies the way we have other places in the country. But I realized that my first year, or second year, I guess it was, I had a student who was worst behaved student I ever had, and used to like always talk back, curse me out. I wrote him up, wound up failing him the end of the year, and I just had this anger towards the kid, right? And then found out later, about his home life from a different teacher after he had graduated, and how horrible home life was. And like he had to take care of his mother because his father was this way and all this kind of stuff, right? It's a story you hear over and over. But that was my first time hearing something like that. And it really made me understand, clearly for the first time, that this kid was behaving this way because of this, right? And maybe there was some other factor, but there was this factor that I had no idea about, that I was never told about. And as much as you call home or talk to whoever, you might not ever find it out, right? And since then, that's kind of it's kind of informed the way I look at them. Like Mike said, we love all of our students for that reason, because I don't find myself ever having that sort of anger anymore, because I realize they're just kids, and they're just dealing with the cards that they've been dealt, sometimes really horrible cards. And so even when a kid is acting in a way that's extreme, I have to put it into that light that this is just a kid. They're not an adult who's been through and should have learned their lesson or whatever. And so, when we're talking about these really serious things that happen, that fortunately haven't happened to us, I think you got to see it in that light too. I mean, often there's a mental health component too. But I think the best we could do as teachers is just be aware of that, rather than reacting to those kids in this like angry, overly disciplinary way that's going to make them want revenge or want to make them like, get back at the school, seeing all of them as empathetic as we can. I guess that's the tool. Yeah.
So do you think working with teenagers kind of makes you understand yourself as a teenager more?
Oh yeah.
And how you acted as a kid and what influenced that? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not just me, but like the way, if I had friends that acted in some ridiculous way, or I had, somebody in school that did something that was crazy, all of those things. I mean, like I said, I don't have kids, but my wife has a son who's now 21, but I've been with my wife for 10 years now. So I've seen him grow from a young teenager to an adult. And it definitely helped me, because he's lived with us most of the time, not be too strict in things that he's done, because I realized that a lot of it's just being a teenager, being confused, doing your best, but screwing up all the time because you're learning all these things for the first time. And like Mike said, he was not as outgoing in high school. I definitely wasn't outgoing in high school. And I see maybe some reasons why I didn't open up then and why I opened up later, that sort of thing. So yeah, definitely it's interesting to see it from this perspective now, because I think a lot of adults, because they're not in that environment anymore, they forget. Like Mike said, they see it as like the glory days, and they see it as like, with these rose tinted glasses. And obviously every generation's dealt with their own type of thing, whether whatever it is. There was no glory days. There was always just the good and the bad. Yeah.
Now, I remember hearing colleagues a little bit younger than you, Rich, who have said to me, "Oh, when I was a kid, we all did our homework." I'm like, "No, I taught when you were a kid. You did not all do your homework. Trust me." Like, you're thinking maybe you did. I'm not going to say you didn't.
Yeah, right.
No, definitely not all of them did. They always look back and they have this idea that the world was perfect and there was nobody ever had any problems with anybody else. Oh my God, we had race riots. No, that's not true. It is just not true. It was terrible. You don't remember how terrible it was because we're able to go through life a little bit easier than other people.
Yeah.
So that's all.
So another thing I wanted to ask, like, obviously you guys have been teaching during the dawn of social media and smartphones and all of that. How have you seen that develop?
I wanted to get to this as well. How
there was, like, I remember when you guys first started having your phone under a bag where you would go 222-744 because you had to text.
We didn't even have that. It was beepers.
Oh, yeah. That's true. There's beepers. Yeah, that's right. That was like a few years after you that we got the texting by like pressing those numbers. I'm like,
you had to go to the payphones by the gym or by the auditorium.
I love pointing out that section too. I'm like, there's that like indentation still. I'm like, do you know what that was for? And kids have no clue. They're like, was it a display case? I go, it was for phone.
You had to pay to use the phone.
You needed a quarter. Yeah.
But definitely I've seen like it go to, from that kind of texting. And here's what I've noticed is anytime.
What is the school's policy on phones? Quickly.
I don't think
there isn't much one.
Good.
Really?
You can have one. That's it.
Teacher can tell you not to have it out during class.
We're not allowed to like confiscate them or take them away because of emergency reasons. And in the middle school, they're more strict because they're younger. But with high school,
when I was there was a teacher in the middle school who would take devices and cut them in half. If kids had beepers or Walkmans. Yeah, you definitely can't do that now, though, huh?
He might. I don't know.
Cut someone's Walkman in half.
Yeah, he would take it to the bandsaw, like just put it right through it.
Oh my God,
of,
that's horrible.
Like CD players and Walkmans that he cut up.
Well, once you mention a name, I will go quiet on any subject.
Just
to let you know. I don't talk about my colleagues. They're my
Yeah.
colleagues. I've been working with them for 28 years. I hope to work from at least another 16 or so until at least I'm,
right.
Until this old ticker gives out. Oh, thank you. Yeah, only because I don't like talking. I don't like talking.
I personally don't know any of the middle school teachers very well at all. But I know the policy with phones is a little easier for them to enforce in middle school, whereas with high school, because the kids are near adulthood, there's talk of, because of emergencies and things like that, they need to have the freedom to have the phones on them. So, like, I can tell the kids to put away their phones. I can tell them to bring a phone up to the classroom. Some teachers do the whole big, like, handing your phone at the beginning of the period, take it at the end. But ultimately, we can't like take them away for the day or anything like that. So I've actually found, I don't know if Mike would agree, but I think the kids are slightly better with them now. It was more, I think, when they were introduced, the iPhone was introduced. So say like around 2010, that it was the worst. Yeah.
I think every time there was a new technology, it was the worst.
Yeah.
So like literally, I remember when it was that pressing the numbers, every kid was doing it. And then that kind of faded. And then all of a sudden you could text normal and everybody was doing it. And then that kind of, and then Snapchat, everybody's snapping each other the finger throughout school day, and then that kind of faded. And, and now, TikTok. And so now kids are doing TikToks, and
That's
it's like,
true.
okay. But like, but I used to pass notes, so we spend the whole class writing notes and then we'd pass them. And then you'd
that
read
little
the note that they
origami thing where you would like choose
the football.
The football.
No. I wasn't that sophisticated.
Right.
That's like
that
was mostly only women were allowed to learn those skills back then.
Yeah,
we were very
that's a girl
sexist
thing,
society. Men were not allowed to learn how to do that magic thing. Yeah,
right.
But we would put them as little footballs. We'd fold them up as little paper.
Oh yeah,
you would punt them across the room.
Yeah. We had in my like graduating class, because it was so small, we had two bands really, right? And I was in one of them. We used to put the band symbols, draw our band symbols on the desks. That was the thing. We'd compete. We'd erase the other band's thing and put ours there. And we littered the whole, would put stuff on every desk in the school. So we were.
We got him. We got the guy who was writing on the desk.
Yeah.
Well,
that was a big thing, even outside of the band, just communicating to your friends. If you knew they were in the same classroom as you, people would write you a message on the desk and, keep writing. Yeah. I'd imagine that might still happen.
No, I don't really see anything on the desk anymore.
No, thank God. I mean, I have now my desks are the original ones from 1959 or whenever they built the high school. And so a few years back, I had two wonderful young students who volunteered, and several afternoons throughout the year, we sanded down as best as we could. We put wood filler in, we painted over and did that. And because there were some not very nice things that were carved into those wooden science class. We tried to make tic-tac-toe symbols out of the Nazi symbol, things like that to try to make it look not as horrible. But it's just filling those in made me feel so much better. And just this year, I've been purchasing these sheets of whiteboard sheet that can adhesive, and I've been putting those across the desk. And the kids are loving to be able to do their physics on the desk. I mean, as much as you might love doing physics, but they're doing it right there on the desk on the whiteboard, and then they take a picture of it afterwards instead of writing in their book. I don't know. They like it, so it's great. And they're having fun. It's new, so of course it's going to be great. And then 3 years, everybody's like, "Why do we have this?" But and it also gives a nice white, clean look to my desks, and I'm feeling so much better. Because I never want a kid I had one person unfortunately, on one of my calculators carve in the N word. And I'm just throwing out this calculator because I go, God forbid, what happens if somebody of color pulls that out? I'm like, no, now it's garbage, and those, So I always like to try to keep those things. Not that I'm not saying I'm a neat person, not, but I don't want any kind of negative things happening to a kid. They shouldn't have to come to my class and see something like that. Yeah. But anyway, we were talking about social media. Yeah, I think that in general, there's been a change. There's a little bit more how do I look, how, kind of thing. But yet they're also not as much
fashion conscious, no, or care. I do a poll every period of the last couple of weeks, just looking around the classroom informally, and it's all but one or two students that are wearing sweatpants now.
Yeah,
completely.
Crocs.
Yeah,
Crocs. Nobody's dressed inappropriately.
No, it's just comfort now.
Nice comfort, which is good. And then
And I was saying to them, because I teach a music history class, so we talk about culture. And I was saying, if you looked at my classroom in 2023 and 2003, like 20 years ago, the dress style would not be very different. Whereas, like, I'm talking about the 60s with them. If you go from 1962 to 1967, the dress is different,
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But in the last 20 years, it hasn't really changed. And it's the same sort of stuff. Yeah.
Well, even in public schools back then, there was a dress code. Like boys
Yeah.
couldn't wear jeans, girls couldn't wear pants.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back when
Yeah,
our
when
parents
when
went
I
to
was
high
a
school.
kid,
Yeah.
Also,
when I was a kid, we were not allowed to wear shorts. Boys were not allowed to wear shorts.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, not until I was in 11th grade, I think. 11th grade, we had some seniors who were like socially conscious who showed up in skirts because like they wanted to show, hey, listen, why can't we wear Bermuda shorts? And so they finally allowed us to wear shorts that go to your knees.
Imagine when shorts were rebellious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
It used to be hats. We used to not be able to wear hats in the high school, and now we can.
Yeah.
But speaking about social media, I think about this with my music class all the time, how for whatever reason, the internet has slowed culture down, right? So that, like we're saying, with clothing, it hasn't changed much. With music, even, you don't see a lot of genres that are breaking out as singularly as they did. There's not that monoculture anymore that everybody's tuned into. The students obviously now they have access to every piece of music that's ever existed, but they're not as adventurous, even though they could be. I talk about like how being like a punk kid in high school, going into the city to find, or even just going like None of the Above in Center Reach, going there to buy like things I couldn't find anywhere else. But especially if I went to like the city and found something that I couldn't find, it was so special to have that CD that I had to search for, or mailing away to like SST and getting records or getting CDs that couldn't find in the record store, and I had to send away for this. And so getting it back is so special.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they can just type it into YouTube, Spotify, whatever, but they don't choose to as much as they once did. So there's something about having it so easy that makes people's tastes not as adventurous, I guess.
Well, it's also easier to zero in on the exact thing that you like.
That's true.
Tune everything else out.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
right.
But I feel like maybe because I didn't know what something sounded like, and I would go into like Bleecker Bob's in the city and get it.
Yeah.
Making that trip and buying it because I spent my $15 on it would force me to listen to it more than once.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I would get into styles that I wouldn't normally get into for that reason. I would teach myself.
You sometimes have to learn to like it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's $15. I was like,
There's some stuff I listened to back in the day that I listen to now, and I'm like, ooh.
I'm going to tell you guys
wasn't
some
great.
stupid aside story just because of what you said, Rich. So there was a time in my life where I just grew up listening to whatever was around me. But I remember being in college as a college freshman. I'm like, okay, I'm an adult. I need to start listening to more alternative music. And it was like, I was dead serious about it. I'm like, I am going to just listen to alternative. And this is before Nirvana. And it's like, I'm going to like just go into, WDRE or WLIR. And then I'm going to start seeing shows of random bands that I've never heard of.
College rock, as they called it.
Yeah,
at the time.
yeah. And I was like, I'm gonna get into college rock. This is what I'm gonna do. Like, this was my seriousness about being 18.
Yeah. It was also interesting back then, in college specifically with record stores, where there was one particular store in my college town that had a lot of weird alternative college rock type of stuff. And I was turned on to a lot of things just because of the employees there. I also worked at the radio station, so I was turned on to things because of the people that I worked with at the radio station. And now it's more you're turned on to it because you're Googling around and you find this, you find that. So
Spotify is suggesting it. Yeah,
exactly. So it was without the algorithm back then that I think also made what you listen to a lot more random and maybe made a little less sense, but made you more open-minded to find new things, perhaps.
Yeah.
But I also talked to them about how post-internet, you don't have the groups of, subcultures the way you once did. Like in the 90s, we had like, obviously the punk kids, skater kids, like preppy kids, jocks, goth kids, whatever. You just don't have that now. There's no subcultures like that. They're just all kind of dressed the same. Yeah, which is interesting.
I feel like by the time I was graduating, that was changing, and like we all kind of changed into like an amorphous, like shorts and sandals and socks kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was around that time.
I remember
For the
going down.
90s, every kid had that like hair with a flip in the front. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
We call it, it's called the Lindy flip, is what it's referred to.
It was in more than just Lindy. I think it was
Oh, yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
That's
my
funny.
God.
No, I remember going out to college and wearing Jenkos, and they just didn't have them in Delaware. Like no one wore them, so first I felt out of place, and then I was like, no, screw it, I'm gonna wear what I wear. Yeah, but
Yeah, that was prime time when I was in high school.
in '97 I went to college, so
I remember when I was in high school, it was like jeans, some kind of like t-shirt with maybe a band on it, and like flannel. And then all of a sudden, like that went out. And then when Nirvana came back and like Pearl Jam and stuff, I'm like, the band's getting back together. And I just went right back into my grunge look, which wasn't called grunge when I was a kid. It was called dirtbag, but okay.
that's how I dress. That's how I dress as a teacher now. 20 years of my career, so.
No apologies.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, as far as social media in general, it's like any other technology where it's like, benefits and detriments. I think during COVID, a lot of us realized like how to use Chromebooks and Google. I use Google Classroom now to our advantage. So we found out the things that worked. We definitely didn't. I don't know any teachers that enjoyed doing the remote thing. So definitely saw how that was not beneficial for the students. But I've kept some of that technology. And so some of that they can do on their phones. It's definitely good that if I assign things on Google Classroom and their students missing something, they can just go on their phone to the Classroom app and see what they're missing, right? Whereas like we had to actually know what it was, and maybe you forgot about something or whatever. Now it's right there in front of them. Their parents can see it's right there in front of them. So that's a benefit. And just the idea of them being able to, if they're curious about something, look it up is so huge, and I think it's maybe one of the big reasons why they're nicer to one another, because they're just exposed to the right information a lot of the time. There's also a lot more kids that are into like conspiracy theories and stuff like that because of the internet. But in general, like if they're curious about something that like sex or drugs that we would have to learn from our friends or our parents, they can just Google it and hopefully find the right information rather than guessing or being, uninformed.
Yeah, the lizard people told me not to believe in conspiracy theories. So
Yeah. I mean, also politics, like kids are much more politically aware earlier in life than I think we are.
some of them are.
Yes and no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
much more than you were.
Yeah.
Much more than you were, but but some of them are still totally unaware. And then, and it's like anybody, like their politics can go very surface. They don't always go deep. They're absorbing things like a kid absorbs. And like, the kid, if you get to work, especially with like younger kids who are like in middle school or whatever, they hear something. They're like, this is the big deal. This is the truth. And I remember this kid, like, oh my God, this is a long time ago, so please forgive my age. But this kid coming to me, oh my God, we may have won $1 million. And we got the West, whatever that was, Waterhouse or whatever it was.
Oh, right.
I'm like, you didn't win $1 million. No, we got the letter. No.
That was the one where Ed McMahon would come.
Ed
here.
McMahon, right.
Yeah.
Publishers Clearinghouse.
That's it, Publishers Clearinghouse. And I'm like, been too long, but yeah. I was like, no, you didn't win. I'm sorry. Like, but so I feel they can be that way sometimes about politics. Like, oh, this is the way. This is the one way.
Yeah.
And if I don't want to get into politics, but I'll just say everything is much, much more complex than anybody gives it credit to be. Things are very difficult. There's a reason why we haven't gotten it right yet. It's because it's very, very hard to get it right, especially when you're dealing with 7 or 8 billion people. Very hard.
Lots of moving parts.
Lots of things are going on. So it's like when you're like, oh, what do you think about this? I'm like, I mean, do you want to spend a couple days talking to me about like, well, there's this, and then if you go back and there was that, and it's like, oh my gosh, and it's like, yeah.
I always tell them it's great to that you're interested in it and trying to form an opinion, but also you got to give yourself time to form an opinion because you have to have life experience. I mean, there's probably a good reason that you don't vote until you're 18. You have to like experience things and form your opinion that way rather than just what your parents are telling you or whoever's telling you. Yeah, and meet people. And go out
a
with
lot of people. And really try to understand the people's situations and the people's feelings. I know that I have shifted my politics based on the number of people that I've met in my life in different situations than me, and has opened my eyes to things that I did, because I grew up pretty okay. I mean, we weren't like wealthy or anything, but like, we lived, but we did okay. And then like I meet these people who have had some very big struggles in their lives, and I'm like, wow, we got to do something for those people, and there has to be something. And then somebody else is like, oh, but then this has happened. I go, okay, so we need to have something to like, protect the people from doing that. And I don't know, it just gets complex.
To their benefit now, the fact that we have so many different cultures in the school definitely can only help that, I think, that they're seeing all these different perspectives.
Yeah, and some of them are having decent conversations with each other about different cultures and why there are different cultures. So it's kind of interesting when you have somebody who is a Muslim say, oh, why is it that you get presents on Jesus's birthday? And like that kid's like, I don't know. It's like, because they've never like looked into the origin of where that comes from. And I'm like, okay, I hate to interrupt, but it's a cultural thing that we give presents, not a religious thing. It doesn't say in the Bible, thou shalt give presents to kids on Jesus' birthday. It's a cultural thing. And so it's interesting to watch that, but they're like trying to exchange that culture. They're trying to understand each other. It's like, oh, why do you have to fast? And it's like, for a month. And it's good to see that that's happening, because at least then they get like some insight.
Yeah, I remember me coming out of Catholic school for the first time, going into public high school, just meeting kids who didn't grow up with religion at all. I was like, what do you mean you don't go to church on Sunday? Like, I just didn't know that was a thing.
Right.
Yeah. Crazy.
You could not do that?
Like, I pity your soul. I don't know.
I remember when my sister got married, she was excited to find out she can have more than 3 cookies in a sitting.
A fun question I had for you guys, speaking of 3 cookies in a sitting, is how has lunch changed over the years since you?
I was going to ask that as well.
Yeah. That's cheese bagels.
What? Exactly.
Cheese bagels.
Yeah. Cheese bagel, bacon, chicken parm, the works. Less Fran.
There's actually, I think that there's more.
How has the cost changed? Is my big question.
I don't know. I don't know because I don't buy. I don't think it's changed too much. I think the cost for kids, much of it is subsidized. So
Gotcha.
The cost to kids are still going to be like, I don't know, $1, $2, something like that. So a lot of it tends to be subsidized. And then and there's a little bit more variety. Like they can get a sandwich made like on a wrap, and they can choose what goes in it. They can get on Monday and Thursday acai bowls, so it's like we have a little bit more variety, which is good, because not everybody wants to eat anything. But what I think we need to do is we need to make sure that we have food for everybody, because there are some people who can only eat certain foods, like I can only eat maybe kosher food, or I can eat maybe only,
right.
Whatever,
Also, food sensitivities are on the rise as well. So, yeah.
So like, I think that's one thing we need to move towards. I would like to see even more diversity, but it's hard to create good diversity with cheapness, because you still have to keep the price low. You still have to make it accessible. You don't want to sit there and be like, well, we're raising taxes so the kids can have like steak. They don't want to hear that. But like, it is more diverse. So that's
the teachers ourselves. I mean, when I first started, everyone went to the faculty cafeteria, and then gradually over, I guess, the first 5 years of my career, just went away. And now the faculty cafeteria is, I think it was closed for a while.
They don't have it open for teachers anymore.
Yeah, so
teachers can no longer go into their own separate cafeteria to buy lunch. Yeah.
So unless I have cafeteria duty, I really don't see what their lunch is. Yeah.
Another thing I was going to ask you guys, Rich, you mentioned that you teach a music appreciation class or a music history class.
Music history, yeah.
Okay. Are there any other like extracurricular activities that you guys are involved in?
Mike is involved in a lot.
Okay. I was up until this year. Yeah. Okay. So over the course of my year, I've done the yearbook for a couple of years back when John was around. I've done the theater program for a very long time. For most of my high school career, with the exception of a few small years after Albano retired, and then me getting back into it when they got rid of a few people. So I love doing the theater program. I've done several classes where I've been a class advisor for several things. And that's been a lot of fun. Like, it's just, it's a lot. It's really great when you get to have, especially because I tend to teach a course that tends to be a little bit difficult for some people. So it's nice to have it where it's like, nope, we're just going to have, we're going to try to do our best. We're going to have high quality, but it's like, come as you are. Let's see what we can get out of it, And so that's always a great time because you have such a positive experience with the kids. There's no grading how they did. I don't sit there and be like, rah, 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 rah. It's just like it's almost all positive. And so that's like really a nice thing for me. And I really enjoyed it. And I got to say, I'm very busy this year because with Mr. Tan retiring, who was a physics teacher who taught AP Physics 1 and 2, I had to take over the AP Physics program. And so that's 2 APs this year. I'm like, I can't do 2 APs and extracurriculars. Not right now. So I'm hoping that maybe in a few years I can get back into the theater program again.
I was gonna say, I have to say, Mike has done some of the more interesting plays that you'll see in a high school environment.
Yeah.
I was going to ask what some of your favorite shows you put on were.
Okay, thank you for asking. Because I do pride myself on the fact that I'm the benefit of being around for as long as I have is I can take risks that a new teacher cannot. And so like some of the shows that I've done that I've loved, I mean, I've done so many shows that I love. Like I probably love every single one of them. But some of them that I was specifically proud of is when we did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
That was my favorite.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like the kids bought in so much to it. We did a lot of research into mental health. We did a lot of research into what the facilities were like in the 50s and 60s, about the abuses in the system that they had back then. And we took a look at these characters and we talked about how these characters weren't very sick. They were shut away from society because they were different, really. Like, wow, the one guy's in there because he's gay. And that's why he's in there. Yeah. Another guy's in there because he's just a little wacky, but just a little, all those characters are not all those characters would be outpatient mental health people right now, or not even mental health people. And so you're in there and you're and you sit there and you have this beautiful, research that goes into this beautiful understanding. And then the story is such a great story. I'm sure you've all seen it in one form or the other. And then there was some artistic things I could do where I had a kid who did a whole bunch of animation. Like I said, I want you to stream together for when Chief is having these visions. And I want this all kinds of things that are related to the vision flashing on him and on behind him on the walls. And it was really well, I was really well done. And everybody in the audience who knew when, Mickey said no to the Nurse Ratched, everybody cheered. And then afterwards, everybody was I just knew the whole entire audience was captured completely. And
that was an awesome experience. It's probably the best experience I've had as an audience member at a high school show of any type. It was really awesome. And I've taught that. I've taught a number of years. I used to teach it in 11th grade and 12th grade, and it's a difficult book. It's not easy. People forget when the film is amazing, right? But
the film's amazing, but it's different
because of how the novel's written. It's very psychedelic. It's very odd because the Chief is narrating it and he's schizophrenic and he's seeing the nurse as a robot and a monster and all these types of things. So I knew Mike would be able to do it well, but I was really impressed. He did an amazing job. The kids did I was teaching all 12th grade that year, so I had a lot of the kids who were actors in it. Just a phenomenal job.
And the set itself, what I did is we made this forced perspective, and I put this short door at the end of this hallway with this forced perspective. So anybody who opened the door when they entered it, they would look huge, because in Chief, you had to be big to be on the outside. Mm-hmm. But as they walked down the hall into the main part of the set, as the perspective came, they would look tiny. And I made my set 2 flats high, so everything looked so much smaller, because Chief saw the people in here are here because they're small, mm-hmm. And so it was a lot of fun to play around with that, physically too, to actually take the artist of the stagery. And then, there's a lot of them I could go on, but there's one more I want to talk about, which is the one I did last year called She Kills Monsters. And
great soundtrack for that one.
Yeah. Shh. Yeah, it was a great soundtrack.
Yeah.
I always make a soundtrack to like kind of go along with every play I do. So it's like kind of sets the mood as you're walking in. And in that one I actually kind of included in the background of the play as it was going too. So it She Kills Monsters has a lot of D&D theme to it, which I thought was really cool. I brought in some of my LARPing experience. I spent $2,000 of my own money in buying props because I'm like, I don't have any right to charge the club for this, even though the club had enough money to pay for it. I'm like, no, this is just purely me wanting to have actual metal chainmail and metal breastplate on this
Yeah.
and having like realistic looking weapons in their hands that are
Yep.
really latex. And so I'm like, I'm just gonna, because this is me. I do that. Like I want a certain vision when I'm doing these plays, and I want it to look a certain way because I'm saying a message and different things like that. But also had some huge LGBTQ things in it. It took place in the 90s, and basically it's two sisters. One winds up dying, and the other one finds out, like, knew she was a nerd, finds out about she was into Dungeons and Dragons, and through that finds out she may or may not have been gay, or even she liked to play a male character, so maybe she might have seen herself a bit as a man. But like definitely her friend, she finds out the friend that she was very friendly with is definitely gay, and so it's like that whole like coming to terms with things and stuff like that within that was like again a little bit risque and stuff like that as far as like, but I kind of like to do it because it was also kind of good for me because I felt it was like really a strong message about how I embrace my students who are on the LGBTQ spectrum, and to have them playing those characters like that, I thought was really great, you know, and I've always been very proud of like letting my kids be who they are.
Yeah, it was very well received, and it was the type of thing that I think you couldn't have done even a decade ago. It might have been a little more challenging to do, but because the allegory worked very well for modern, for the way what the concerns modern teenagers have, and then I think it was helpful that they had Stranger Things to like bring
Yes.
in the Dungeon and Dragons part that they might
Yes.
not have known without. So that was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the right time to do it.
That's another thing I'm sure compared to when we were kids, a lot more are out
Yes.
Oh,
Oh yeah,
now.
absolutely.
Yeah,
When you were young, most people were not.
mhm.
When I was young, nobody was. You know,
They didn't
absolutely.
have a club until 2005 or six, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
No, it
remember
was like
when the club was when they started the club, I had to write up kids, unfortunately, at the beginning of it, just because of comments that were made and things like that. So it's amazing. I talk to my students about that too, culturally. That's amazing to me how quickly that has changed, and it's impossible for them to know because my freshmen were born in 2009. So
yeah.
they were born in the midst of it, but I try to show them from our perspective how much things have changed from the 90s to now, especially with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
yeah. It was not safe to be
No.
out back in the
No,
90s
it was not.
at
It
all.
was definitely not.
And now trans
No.
is accepted, for the most part.
Yeah, for the most part,
Yeah.
definitely among the kids a lot more.
Among the kids, I mean,
Among
yeah,
the kids, it's pretty well accepted. Some adults still have issues with it.
yes. But I mean, I couldn't imagine that early in my career being something that kids would talk about openly. And
Right.
I have several, I shouldn't say several, but I have at least one or two kids every year that
Mhm.
are trans, and it's not like Mike said, amongst the kids, it's not an issue at all. It's not even like a
Right.
topic they bring up. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
when I
just
was
acceptable.
younger in my career, I knew kids who after high school
Mhm.
would transition,
Yes, me too.
but they weren't going to do it in a high school environment. And
Mm.
anybody who did, they were very brave. Anybody who
Absolutely.
like was even out, like you said, very brave to be out
Mm.
and would have to fight for being who they are.
Yeah. So I guess one of my closing questions, and this is like sort of research for future episodes, but do you have any former students who went on to do cool things?
Yes. Um, wow, it's almost like I'd be better off like just thinking about it and emailing you because I almost there's been like we have
Sure. Yeah.
you know I we have some people who have gone on to went to MIT, went to Caltech, and is now working at the JPL. We've had Mark who did the whole what was that, baggage wars or
Yes. Mark Meyer. Yeah.
Yeah, he came back and met with my thespian students. God bless him. Thank you so much, for him doing that. The kids really loved it. You know, I know I'm forgetting people because there's like,
I got
I know kids who've gone on to do acting and to certain levels of success. And they're still kind of brewing on that success. I know some people.
I never had Jeremy Ruckert. I never had Jeremy Ruckert,
Ruckert,
but he's one that obviously everybody knows.
Yeah, I think everybody knows Jeremy Ruckert.
My cousin, who I actually had as a student also, but Vinny Winey is his name. He was just playing football in Italy, but now he just signed with the WWE.
Wow.
So that could be interesting. He just signed, so we don't know where it's going to go. But
yeah, we've had
okay.
He was supposed to student teach with me this year, so he went from student teaching as an English teacher to the WWE within the span of a couple of days.
So he's down in Orlando or whatever, training with them there.
I'm actually not sure. I know he's training. I don't know if it's in Orlando. Yeah.
Yeah, I have several students that I know that are playing soccer or football over in Europe, and one of them also played for a national team. During getting ready for the World Cup and stuff like that. So so it's been pretty cool to just know that they're like a lot of them on the verge of being big, but they're still doing amazing things. Yeah. But let me think about it and get back to you. I'll email you with a lot more names.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Because another part of it is I don't want anybody out there why did Smith mention me? I'm doing
right. My closing question to you guys would be if you could they were getting rid of all of the murals on the wall in the high school and you could each only save one. Which would be the one you would save?
I know. I would save the one outside my room that said Jawa. Because I just loved having that Jawa one right outside of my room. Star Wars. Come on. It was Jawa. Yeah. It was just so fun. And so for me, it has a heart thing to it that so.
Yeah, I have a similar one. I like that there's a Hives one, just because I find that weird that the Hives not being a very popular band or not popular amongst.
I know who made that one.
Okay. Yeah. I love that that's there. But in my classroom, I have the book Mouse, which is, if you don't know, it's a graphic novel, right? Yeah. And it was one of my favorite students that I let draw it, right? But she did it after school. I probably shouldn't say this because I probably shouldn't have let her, but she did it after school hours after I left. And if you know anything about Mouse, the one character, the author, has always smoking a cigarette. Mm-hmm. And so she drew the author and his father, they're both mice. The father is in one corner, the author in the other with his cigarette. He's actually got the Hunter Thompson thing, the cigarette holder and everything. And so only one administrator ever said anything about that, about the cigarette. I'm surprised that nobody has commented or complained about it. But I hope just for nostalgia reasons, even though there's a cigarette there and maybe not the best thing in a high school classroom, but I hope it stays up there.
I hope it wasn't an English teacher who made that comment. An English
no, it's not an English administrator. No.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. They were actually asking whether it was a joint, which I was like, no, of course it's not.
No.
I definitely wouldn't allow that. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the context of the story. So,
And I'd also just like to say thank you guys so much for doing this. I've enjoyed listening to some of your podcasts. Right, it was fun, especially when I've seen some of my former students.
Yeah.
Well, not seen, listen to them, so Aaron Lohman was on.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's great to see people from the music scene. I know you had George Reynolds on a while ago, right? I had Melissa Bates as a student, so that's cool that you guys had.
Oh yeah, Melissa Bates. I married.
Yeah, that's right. You officiated that wedding.
I officiated that wedding.
That's awesome. Yeah, very cool. No, but when I first saw that you guys were doing this, I told a lot of my colleagues about it. So it's cool, for people to kind of follow and see who's going to be on it. A lot of the people you've had on, I think, were from before I was teaching, right? A lot of people 90s graduates.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's definitely cool to see. And things that I didn't even know about, I like how you did the story about the girl who went missing or was.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember hearing about that.
But I didn't know anything about it. Yeah.
As a kid, I remember hearing about that because I was like 2 neighborhoods away, right?
I think that's why we have a closed campus. Is that right?
That's what I heard.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
The deli.
That was another question for me. What's the hot lunch spot for teachers? Is it Chipotle now that it's
No,
open?
not Chipotle.
I bring a frozen TV dinner every day, and I just
In the English,
That's the move.
I'll tell you, in the English department, we definitely had. We haven't done it this year, but we had a trend going for a number of years where every Friday we would get Foods of Italia. So somebody
that's
would
good.
go
That's a good
That's the
place.
spot.
get the Italian special for everybody. Yeah, so that was definitely probably the most common one. That yeah,
Yeah.
I probably eat at the
And
diner.
what is it
most.
real?
and Kurt's Deli.
What's it like in the Kurt's Deli for
Oh,
life? Friendly Deli back in the
Oh,
day.
yeah.
Oh
Friendly
yeah,
Deli,
yeah.
Kurt's
Well,
Deli,
Matt Bacconfuso.
Bacconfuso used to work
AP
there.
now. Yeah, he was the worker there. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
Yes.
like talking to him when he was an employee there, and he's like, "I want to become a teacher." I'm like, "Yeah."
That was right on the way to my father's business. So, we used to go there all the time on the way to work. And my father was actually, friendly with him before I even started teaching. So I knew Matt before. Yeah. And now he's Dr.
There you
Dr.
go.
something.
Mhm.
Doc Bach.
Yeah, Doc Bach.
Do you know? Used to be called Sarah Guglieri. She's
Oh,
called
right.
Sarah McGuire.
Mhm.
She was like I think we know her brother tangentially, Jesse, but
So they
Yeah.
have a like. Her father was like best friends with him. So we
Yeah,
can
she
get-
actually
we can get
got
him.
through her. She knows my uncle. My father's, pizza oven company. Dan Loria did an ad for them for that reason. Yeah.
Mhm.
My father knew
ah,
My father knew Pat Benatar's brother, who passed away, but not her. She was older. I think she's like 69 to 70, something like that. She graduated.
Pat Benatar's cousin was
yeah.
my chorus teacher.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I don't know if we could hook you up with her though. I don't know. My parents had told me that the rumor was early in her career that she said she wouldn't say she was from Lindenhurst. She only said she was from a South Shore town. But
She's changed that because she had
she's
the chorus
totally
come in.
changed.
She's
My
had the
parents
chorus
said
come
she
in and
has,
sing
like-
with her and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah,
My parents said the last concert they saw, she had everybody from Lindenhurst stand up, and
Yeah.
so she's
I mean, also like back in the day, some things happened in Lindenhurst that were not so. You didn't want to necessarily. Were not so great.
yeah, it could be.
yes.
A lot of bad things had happened that maybe you might want to like. No, the town that had a Nazi parade. I don't want to.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's true.
Don't
Time has
forget, she's
passed.
older than me, so she's
Right. That's
she's
a good
definitely
point.
had to worry about people who were World War II vets.
All right. So I guess that's going to bring us to our closing question. We'll start with Mike. If you could describe Lindenhurst as somebody who's never been there, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that it's a town where the community has a lot of heart, where the community, whenever the chips are down, they come together and they make it happen. They're a community that wants everybody in the community to succeed. That's what I've noticed throughout my 28 years of being here. And I think that it's just a great place, and I hope it just keeps getting greater.
Yeah. Very similar. We definitely noticed that it's a town with a lot of heart that comes together. Hurricane Sandy, like we talked about before, was a great example of that. Or the student Mike talked about, that was actually my first year of teaching when that student died. And that was my first introduction to the community in that way. And you really saw it. But I had seen it, not even realizing, through the music scene in the 90s, all the bands that were from, all the hardcore bands that were from Lindenhurst, and seeing the heart that was, or the sense of community that was there, not even realizing that a lot of that was Lindenhurst. And then now seeing present day, a lot of those bands reuniting, and we were talking about George Reynolds, he just had, his band just played last weekend for the first time in a long time. So that kind of sense of community, whether it's, from music or huge with sports at Lindenhurst, or with talking about the drama and the arts, you can't say much better for a town than that when people come together for those reasons. So,
and not only that, but you never know when you're going to find yourself in somebody's basement listening to an awesome band.
Yeah. Or over the summer in like a backyard filming a video.
Taking Back Sunday.
That too,
Cool stuff. Yeah. That speaks volumes for Lindenhurst, definitely.
Absolutely.
Well, what's funny is you saw the band that Taking Back Sunday got their name from play the song.
Really?
20-something years later, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Now I feel cool. I am the original hipster. I'm going to go get a fedora right now.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much, guys. This was fun.
Thanks for having us, man. It's been great.
Thank you for having us. Have a beautiful night, everybody, and
have
happy
a good night.
holidays. And happy Hanukkah. First night of
Likewise.
Hanukkah.
Hey, do you wanna go home? Or do you wanna walk around this town? Long live the bench.